Welcome to The Explainer. Okay, let's dive right into this, because today we're unpacking a moment that literally rewired human history. We're looking at the Industrial Revolution. And listen, this isn't just some dry history lesson about old dusty machines. It is the ultimate domino effect that built our modern reality. It's essentially the origin story of the world we navigate every single day.
Actually, just take a quick second right now and look around you. Look at the clothes you're wearing, the artificial lights illuminating your room, and the device you're using to experience this explainer right now. None of this was guaranteed. Before the mid-18th century, most humans lived in quiet, rural agrarian societies, making goods by hand. But a single, transformative spark changed absolutely everything. Our modern, mechanized, interconnected lives trace directly back to a very specific time and place.
Section 1. The Spark in Britain. So here's the thing. Before there could even be an industrial revolution, there had to be an agricultural revolution. It was a profound domino effect. First, this agricultural revolution hit British farms. We're talking new techniques like crop rotation and selective breeding that caused food production to just skyrocket. Naturally, more food meant fewer famines, which triggered a massive population boom. But because farming suddenly became so much more efficient, fewer workers were actually needed out in the fields. And that brings us to the ultimate catalyst. Britain suddenly had this massive available labor force with nowhere to go but toward new opportunities. They were perfectly positioned for industrial employment.
But, just having a massive workforce isn't quite enough to trigger a global revolution. Britain possessed a totally unique recipe that really nowhere else had at the time. They sat on abundant natural resources, specifically the coal to fuel the fires and the iron ore to build the machines. They had a vast colonial empire that supplied cheap raw materials like cotton and provided overseas markets to sell all those finished goods to. Plus, thanks to their political stability and strong legal protection for private property, entrepreneurs actually felt safe investing their commercial wealth. Add in a vibrant culture of tinkerers and Enlightenment thinkers obsessed with rational problem solving, and, well, you have the perfect storm.
Section 2. Machines that changed everything. Now, this absolutely wasn't just an overnight shift. It was more like a compounding snowball of innovation that happened in two distinct phases. The first Industrial Revolution, running from about 1760 to 1840, was all about mechanizing textile production, advancing iron, and adopting steam power. Think of early inventions like the spinning jenny. But then, we leap into the second Industrial Revolution between 1870 and 1914, and the snowball gets massive. This is where we see things like cheap steel production, the electrification of cities by minds like Edison and Tesla, and the rise of telecommunications that instantly connected global markets.
But if we're tracing this all back to a single technological game changer of the early days, it's steam, for sure. While early engines did exist, James Watt's improvements to the steam engine in 1769 completely changed the game. See, before Watt, factory owners were entirely at the mercy of river currents and the weather. They had to build right next to moving water. Watt's engine essentially allowed humans to create massive power on demand, literally anywhere on the map. It pumped water from mines, drove heavy factory machinery, and eventually powered the locomotives and steamships that shrunk the globe. It was the ultimate, versatile muscle of the era.
Section 3. The Rise of Factories.
Just try to imagine going from what we call the cottage industry, working from home, making goods by hand with manual tools, and largely dictating your own seasonal schedule, to the new factory system. And this brilliantly illustrates the contrast. We're talking about a completely different universe. Production became centralized in massive buildings, housing large-scale machinery. It introduced the strict division of labor, wage employment, and continuous non-stop production schedules. Overall efficiency and output skyrocketed, but the era of the independent artisan was effectively over.
Section 4. A New Social Order. So, millions of people suddenly migrated from rural villages into industrial towns looking for factory work. This urbanization boom caused cities like Manchester, Birmingham, and Liverpool to just explode in size. But here's the harsh reality. This explosive growth completely outpaced the infrastructure. We are talking about severe, overcrowded slum housing. We're talking about incredibly poor sanitation, leading to rampant, deadly disease outbreaks. In fact, life expectancy in some of these industrialized slums plummeted to as low as 17 years old due to disease and choking coal smog. For the first time on a massive scale, severe air and water pollution became a deadly part of everyday life. 12 to 16 hours. Let that sink in. That was a completely typical workday for the new working class, the proletariat. We so often marvel at the economic boom of this era, but we really have to remember it was built on the backs of exploited workers. And that included women and young children, operating dangerous, heavy machinery for low wages and with absolutely zero legal protections. Now, this incredible wealth generation happening on one side, clashing directly with severe labor exploitation on the other, birthed two competing political ideologies that we still heavily debate today. On one hand, industrial capitalism accelerated. This system emphasized private ownership, free markets, and the core idea that individual entrepreneurship and competition drive innovation. The new industrial bourgeoisie, the factory owners and investors, accumulated immense wealth. But as a direct critique of this system, socialism emerged. Thinkers like Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels argued that capitalism systematically exploited the working class to concentrate wealth at the very top. They advocated for economic equality and collective control over production. These two opposing views on how to structure a modern economy were forged directly in the fires of the Industrial Revolution.
Section 5. Global reach, environmental cost.
And of course, these massive changes couldn't just be contained to Europe. A perfect example of this global impact is the concept of deindustrialization, particularly in colonial India. Before British dominance, India was world-renowned for its high-quality, handmade textiles. But as British factories began mass-producing cheaper, machine-made goods, they flooded the market. Local artisans simply couldn't compete and lost their livelihoods. Britain began using India primarily as a captive source for raw materials like cotton and as a captive market forced to buy British goods. It effectively and drastically drained local wealth to fuel British industrial power.
So, as you can see, this whole era was a massive double-edged sword. Yes, we saw mass production lead to much lower consumer prices, making goods way more affordable for the average person. We saw the growth of a robust middle class, revolutionized global transportation, and just unprecedented economic growth. But the trade-off was brutal. It came at the cost of those 12 to 16-hour workdays, the tragic exploitation of child labor, crushing urban poverty, and the beginnings of massive air pollution and deforestation. Section 6. The Modern World's Foundation. The factories, the power grids, the massive urban centers, and the interconnected global economy we rely on every single second of the day were fundamentally poured and set right during this specific historical window. Our modern systems of mass education, our capitalist frameworks, and even our cultural expectation that technology will just keep getting better and better, all of that is the enduring legacy of the Industrial Revolution. But what else did it leave us? Well, the origins of our contemporary climate challenges, born from the massive coal consumption and resource depletion that started centuries ago. And that leaves us with a pretty critical question to ponder today. We undeniably live in the world the Industrial Revolution built. We benefit immensely from its technological marvels and its economic systems every single day. But as we look toward the future, are we prepared to manage the immense environmental and social consequences it left behind? It's something we all have to figure out as that ultimate domino effect continues to fall. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.